Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. In Pakistan, diplomatic sources have revealed that India's intelligence agency RAW and Afghanistan's NDS are behind the attack that killed 3 people and injured 22 in Lahore last Wednesday. They said the incident once again exposes India's evil designs to destabilize Pakistan by fueling terrorism. Meanwhile, the sources also said Sunday's attack on an airbase in occupied Jammu ahead of the SCO conference raises questions. They attributed the latest hype to the failure of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's conference with the Kashmiri politicians. Indian forces have martyred another civilian in Srinagar, city of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Occupying forces targeted the youth in a so-called cordon and search operation in the Parimpura area. The Indian forces have martyred 368 Kashmiris since New Delhi revoked the occupied valley status in August 2019. The US says its troops stationed in Syria have been attacked by multiple rockets but escaped injuries. In a tweet, military spokesperson Colonel Wayne Maroto said US forces responded by firing back at the positions in self-defense. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack, but earlier, Iran-backed armed groups vowed to retaliate to US air raids in Iraq and Syria. India has reported 907 deaths from the coronavirus and more than 37,000 cases overnight. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 23 more people have died and over 700 tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.9 million lives and has infected over 181 million people. And in tennis, Andy Murray survives a third-set meltdown to beat Nicolas Basilashvili 6-4, 6-3, 5-7 and 6-3 in Wimbledon. In women's singles, Iga Swiatek made a convincing start to her campaign by downing Shai Su Wei 6-4 and 6-4. These were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Start from Pakistan, where diplomatic sources have revealed the involvement of hostile nexus of intelligence agencies in a terrorist attack in Lahore. Last Wednesday, 3 people were killed and 22 injured when an explosives-laden vehicle exploded in the Johor town neighborhood. The sources said India's primary intelligence agency, RAW, and Afghanistan's NDS are behind the attack. They said the incident once again reveals India's evil designs to destabilize Pakistan by fueling terrorism. The sources said the Nexus has been engaged in disrupting peace and stability in the country.
We start working on the vulnerabilities of Pakistan. It can be economic, it can be internal security, it can be political, it can be their isolation internationally, it can be their this thing like that, of exposing their terrorist activities, or it can be anything. It can be defeating their policies in Afghanistan, making it difficult for them to manage internal political balance or internal security. I'm not going into those details.
Pakistan's intelligence agencies have frequently provided proof of the nexus flaring up terrorism, particularly in tribal areas and Balochistan. They questioned if the international institutions will hold India accountable or will continue to blame Pakistan for the menace.
Indian embassies and consulates operating along Pakistan's borders have become hubs of terrorist sponsorship against Pakistan. Indian diplomats in Afghanistan, they have been regularly supervising various terrorist activities. Indian intelligence agencies are managing 87 such terrorist camps. The details are right now, they can be seen on the screen. Out of these terrorist camps, 66 are located in Afghanistan.
Meanwhile, the sources also said Sunday's attack on an airbase in occupied Jammu ahead of the SCO conference raises questions. They attributed the latest hype to the failure of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's conference with the Kashmiri parties. The sources also said there has been a strong conflict going on within India's institutions. They said Chief of Defence Staff Bipin Rawat and India's Air Chief have been at odds over authority. The sources said the drone attack could also be the result of that friction. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi expressed concern over the support of anti-state agencies behind the blast. In a statement, he said the anti-terror financing investigating agencies should conduct a thorough inquiry into resources for such operations. Now, for more on this, we have with us Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodhi, retired. Now, sir, Prime Minister Modi has failed nationally and support for him has been declining. Do you think these tactics will help him make any gains?
That is possible because initially also he came on the tide of Pakistan hatred, and there are enough extremist elements in India to support him. But with the passage of time, as his tactic has not really succeeded, maybe he loses some support. But I think he's still trying the same tactics, that Pakistan hatred card, he's using it again. So let us see what happens. I don't think that many extremists will leave him for that. He might just continuing getting the support, at least from the extremist section of that society.
Right, sir. Given Afghan peace talks, this region can finally hope for some stability. Don't you think India is trying to spoil such efforts by this nefarious nexus with NDS for terror campaigns?
That is very much true, and as Pakistan has very good two principles: one, that we have no favorites, and secondly, that all solutions should be Afghan led and Afghan owned. But then the caveat is that the Afghans should be allowed to do these things themselves. But if other powers like India, they try to interfere or they try to support one side, then there will be a lot of problem. And this is the thing which must be exposed to the entire world. And I think we must draw the attention of the world that if we really want to remain neutral, if they want Pakistan to remain neutral, they have to goad other powers also to remain neutral as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Because if others, they start interfering, then perforce there will be a problem in Afghanistan. So I agree with you that they are trying to destroy the talks which can take place. They don't want peace in Afghanistan, and that all goes against what the world is wanting. So we must try to expose them, whatever they are doing. You're right.
Rightly said, India's nefarious designs must be exposed. Now, thank you very much, Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodhi, for talking to Indus News. Now, we also have with us Zamir Akram, former ambassador. Sir, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has failed nationally and support for him has been declining. Do you think these tactics will help him make any gains?
Well, we have to try harder to do that. As far as the international agencies are concerned, like the United Nations Terrorism Committee, unfortunately, that committee only has recognized some terrorist organizations, mainly related to Al-Qaeda, but they have not recognized some of the agencies that the Indians are sponsoring, like RAW and even the RAW-NDS. So we have to continue trying to have those agencies put on that list of terrorist sponsors. Then we need to make an even greater effort to raise this issue at the bilateral level with the major players, major countries like the U.S., China, and of course, because China also has a concern about India's terrorist sponsorship activities from Afghanistan and elsewhere. So we need to work with the major players in order to project the Indian role in promoting terrorism in Pakistan. Part of this is aimed at Pakistan per se, but it is also aimed, this terrorism, against CPEC. the incidents that have taken place in Balochistan and Karachi against the Chinese consulate point in that direction. So we need to have a major international effort, both bilaterally and through the multinational organizations.
All right, so also, given Afghan peace talks, this region can finally hope for some stability. Don't you think India is trying to spoil such efforts by this nefarious nexus with NDS for terror campaigns?
I don't believe that Mr. Modi has any interest in regional peace. He would like to use whatever opportunity he can to promote his political fortunes. He, if you remember, in 2019, even risked going to war with Pakistan for that purpose in order to win his election. So we should not expect him at all to talk about or to try and contribute towards regional peace and security, especially when it comes to Pakistan.
Absolutely. Former Ambassador Zamir Akram, thank you very much for talking to Indus. Now, we also have with us Lieutenant General Amjad Shoaib, retired now. Sir, Pakistan has always exposed India's false flag operations, yet it continues its terror campaigns. What does New Delhi possibly want to achieve after this humiliation of failed attempts?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I think this is something one may say that the most suitable time from the Indian point of view has been selected for this kind of episode. If you look at the internal situation, it is too bad. Recently, they had a very serious spell of corona, and I think it was a government failure, Modi government's failure, which has been highlighted by everybody in the country. Then there are a number of failures, and now this recent failure of Kashmir conference. Again, it is being talked about within the country. So these are the issues within the country, but the recent developments which are there, if you recall, in the SCO meeting, Ajit Doval was talking about linking FATF with SCO, and there was some sinister design behind it. Pakistan was criticizing the FATF very seriously because of the reason that out of 27 points, we had already implemented 26. And they said that it's a political decision which FATF has taken. It was very obvious. But now India says that this drone was flown by, we can see the, they say that we can see the Lashkar's hand, Lashkar Tayyiba's hand in it. So they want to convey a message to FATF that keep them in grey list because Pakistan is still promoting terrorism. They say, Pakistan says that we have arrested Hafiz Saeed, but he's still operative. And with this kind of message to the world, they will also take away the attention that we are trying to draw towards the explosion that has taken place at Lahore, which we say that it was an attempt to destroy Hafiz Saeed's house. But I think they have diverted the attention, and now they are saying that the man Pakistan says is in detention, but he is still operative. He can do this, he can do that. And then we have also been telling to the world that India is in India there's a black market of uranium which is being sold around in the world. So that again perhaps will be subdued because of the new development that India, and they have the capacity and will to drum it up. So they will go to the world, and perhaps the entire media will support, and this propaganda will definitely push our stance behind because we do not work hard to photograph our stance to the rest of the world. And it is our, I think, failure. Otherwise, this incident which had taken place in Lahore, we had the proof and we had everything. I think we should have straight away gone to we should have called the P5 ambassadors to the Foreign Office and briefed them on the whole situation. But we know these things and we cannot put in that kind of effort. But India immediately has countered the Lahore issue also. They have countered your narrative on FATF. They have diverted the international attention from uranium black market which they are running, and I mean they have recently captured 2 cases who knows that how many have been able to take away uranium and they have escaped to the international market. So these things are internationally very damaging, FATF point of view or perhaps from terrorism point of view, that Pakistan still is a terror-sponsoring state. We have to react in a very, very severe manner. We have to react immediately and in a very emphatic manner so that the Indian narrative is countered.
Right now, so this has been quite evident that Pakistan has been doing its best to facilitate the Afghan peace process. But as sources reveal, RAW and NDS are behind Lahore blast. How do you think such activities will eventually affect Islamabad's support?
I think they don't need our support now. When America has decided to leave Afghanistan in the condition that they are now, where we can see writing on the wall that there is going to be a civil war in that country. America has not really done anything very serious to bring about peace in that country. I mean, we know Ashraf Ghani is a spoiler. We know that India is a spoiler, but America has not used their influence to bring them onto the negotiation table. And they are just leaving. So when they are not interested in bringing peace to Afghanistan, then our relevance is no more there. Our relevance is only for the reason that we want to bring in peace, stability to Afghanistan. And if America also wants to do that, then we are relevant. Otherwise, we are not. So I think Pakistan is not now figuring out an American design. They wanted some bases here in Pakistan, not for Afghanistan, but I think for various other reasons, and including to take care of Pakistan as far as our CPEC is concerned and also your nuclear program is concerned. I think we have done a very wise thing that we have not allowed them to have, or we have refused them to provide any bases. But I don't think it had any relevance to Afghanistan. They stayed there for 20 years, couldn't do much, and now they think that if you give them the bases here in Pakistan and from those two small bases they'll be able to control Afghanistan or do something. That's not possible. I mean, nobody will believe it. So I have a feeling that from now onward, Pakistan is not relevant from that point of view. Pakistan is relevant from negative point of view, that they would like to make sure that you submit to Indian design, because India in the American designs now, India figures out as to be the main South Asian power, which is countering China. And if Pakistan is standing in the way of this design, countering Indian efforts, so they will try to damage Pakistan so that Pakistan submits. So that way, I think we should not now think of those old relationships with the United States that they needed. I mean, if you recall, when there was a Salalah incident, Pakistan said that we are not going to allow you to take your supplies from here to our country. We blocked their supply route. They had to apologize from Pakistan. For 9 months, these supplies won't go through this route. And they had to apologize. But that time was a different time. The troops were there in the United States and they wanted a route. They couldn't live without that. They tried to use the northern route, which was very expensive and also a very time-consuming sort of route. So that way they had to get back to Pakistan. They apologized. But now that thing is not there. They don't have their troops there. Within a few days or within a few weeks, their troops will be gone. So Pakistan is not relevant now. That is the reality, and we must understand. And this is what various American scholars are now telling us. I heard Mr. Cameron Munter very recently in a webinar. He very clearly said that Pakistan is not now relevant.
Right, absolutely. Now, thank you very much for your time, Lieutenant General retired Amjad Shoaib, for talking to Indus News. Now, former Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi has joined us on Indus News. Now, sir, after India's evil designs have been exposed, will international institutions hold New Delhi accountable for state-sponsored terrorism in the region?
Yeah, you see, New Delhi stands exposed, and therefore it will be held accountable for state sponsorship of terrorism. And actually, India has been indulging in terrorism, and in a declared policy, their own national security advisor had declared some time ago that they will be doing terrorism and indulging in terrorism under their policy garb of the offensive defense. So I think the Indians are guilty of this entire this entire scheme of undertaking violence. I think the right forum where they should be exposed and requests should be made for accountability is the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, whose meeting is going to be held very soon. And that is where Pakistan should make its point very effectively with all the member states.
Lastly, sir, do you think Prime Minister Modi is jeopardizing regional peace for his party's gains?
Yes, of course he is. And this is, Modi's policies are very short-sighted. He resorts to all kinds of wrong and illegal methods for promoting his own party's interests and for promoting himself. And that is at some point going to cause him a lot of harm, because this is not responsible behavior, it is not statesman-like behavior, and it is actually sullying or tarnishing the image of India, which was not like this before.
Absolutely. Former Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. We still have news in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. Indian forces have martyred another civilian in Srinagar city of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Occupying forces targeted the youth in a so-called cordon and search operation in the Parempura area. It comes a day after the occupying forces martyred another youth in the same area. Indian forces' crackdown was going on in the area till the last reports came in. Occupying forces have martyred 368 Kashmiris since New Delhi revoked the occupied valley status in August 2019. Now in Afghanistan, the Taliban claim to have captured the KYIV district of Kandahar province. Group spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid said the fighters also killed and captured many Afghan soldiers.
The group said it has captured 2 army checkpoints in Maidan Warda's Sharki area, killing 2 soldiers. In a tweet, Mujahid said the fighters also detained 3 soldiers and seized several weapons and ammunition. Local media quoted Defense Ministry as saying that 22 Taliban were killed in an airstrike in Baghlan province. Meanwhile, Kabul said it has freed 10 villages of Balkh's Sharkhin district from the Taliban, killing 55 fighters during the operations. Earlier, Iran said it is monitoring the situation in Afghanistan, offering to facilitate the intra-Afghan talks. At a press conference, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh stressed the need for an inclusive government in Kabul. He said the Taliban are a part of Afghanistan but won't be the whole present and future of government.
Now, the US says its troops stationed in Syria have been attacked by multiple rockets but escaped injuries. In a tweet, military spokesperson Colonel Wayne Maroto said US forces responded by firing back at the positions in self-defense. He said the damage after rocket strikes is being assessed, but did not provide details on the nature of the target. However, Syrian state media said a United States military base in the Al Omar oil field in the eastern countryside of Deir ez-Zor city is targeted. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack. But earlier, Iran-backed armed groups vowed to retaliate to US air raids in Iraq and Syria, which drew widespread condemnation. Baghdad said it would study all legal options to prevent such actions from being repeated. Syria called the strikes a flagrant violation of the sanctity of Syrian and Iraqi lands. Iran said Washington is moving on the wrong path and urged it to stop interference in the region. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the White House defended the strikes as a way to tamp down on the risk of conflict. The strike killed 4 Iran-backed militia members in Iraq. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has warned Russia against what it called Moscow's attacks and interference. In an interview, Blinken said Washington hopes for more stable and profitable relations with Moscow. But he said the U.S. will respond to Russia's act as like solar wind attacks and intrusions into elections. Talking about China, Blinken said relations with Beijing is the most complicated one. He added the U.S. respects the different ties countries have with China. But the Secretary said Washington will not ask any country to choose between China and the U.S. Now, India has reported 907 deaths from the COVID-19 and more than 37,000 cases overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.9 million lives and has infected over 181 million people. More about the pandemic in this report.
The Delta variant of the coronavirus is fueling the latest wave of the pandemic as the world creeps towards seeing 4 million COVID-19 deaths. The variant continues to cause a headache for major supporting events and forcing countries to revise their travel advisories. As Russia's St. Petersburg prepares to host a Euro 2020 quarterfinal, it keeps posting record COVID-19 deaths. Turkey has halted all direct travel from Bangladesh, Brazil, South Africa, India, Nepal and Sri Lanka due to new variants. In Australia, Brisbane is set to become the fourth major city in lockdown due to concerns about the rapid spread of the Delta variant.
The Delta variant is proving to be a far more difficult element of this virus than we have seen to date. This is not just the case in Australia. It was certainly my experience when I was overseas that the Delta variant is presenting very different challenges from those that we have faced in the past.
Bangladesh is set to enforce a sweeping national lockdown with public transport networks closing and soldiers ready to patrol the streets. In Brazil, an opposition senator filed a criminal complaint against President Jair Bolsonaro over alleged irregularities in vaccine purchases. Meanwhile, the U.S. has raised its COVID-19 related travel advisory for the UAE to level 4. A new study has found that giving a Pfizer jab after administering the first shot of AstraZeneca will produce better immune responses.
We know that the standard schedules with AstraZeneca and Pfizer do protect against disease. So I think that should be the default option. We have enormous safety databases on those schedules, and we know they protect against disease. But we have shown that the mixed schedules do generate a good immune response. So if there were circumstances that meant that you needed to change things around or you needed flexibility, then I think our data are very reassuring that that would be okay.
Johnson & Johnson will not be undertaking local trials for its single-shot COVID-19 vaccine in India. Meanwhile, Israel will destroy 800,000 coronavirus vaccines that are nearing their expiration date if no country agrees to purchase them.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 23 deaths from COVID-19 and 735 cases over the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the nationwide fatality toll has reached 22,254. The virus has infected over 956,000 people in the country so far, while nearly 902,000 have recovered. The ministry said there are over 32,000 active cases and 2,000 of them are critical. According to the NEXUS, the country's positivity rate stayed at 1.78%. Pakistan has administered around 14.8 million doses of vaccines to date. Moving to Ethiopia, where the federal government has declared an immediate and unilateral ceasefire in its Tigray region after nearly 8 months of deadly conflict. This comes after the Tigrayan fighters forced the interim administration to flee the regional capital, Mekelle, and took control of the city.
Ethiopia's government said its announcement followed a request from the interim administration. In a statement, Addis Ababa said the ceasefire will stay until the farming season ends. A spokesperson of the Tigray People's Liberation Force claimed the capital Mekelle is in their control. The group vowed to continue to fight until all enemies leave Tigray. The conflict in Tigray began last year when the central government launched an offensive to oust the then ruling party TPLF. It followed an attack on military bases. Thousands of people were killed and many others displaced in the fighting, prompting calls by humanitarian groups for access to the region. According to the UN, 5 million are in urgent need of aid, while hundreds of thousands face the world's worst famine in a decade. Meanwhile, diplomats said UN Security Council is likely to meet on Tigray this week at the request of the US, Ireland and Britain.
Now, the United Nations says its peacekeeping missions globally are preparing for a possible shutdown. The closure would take effect if the General Assembly fails to agree to a new $6 billion budget for the year to the 30th of June. Talking to media, UN's Management Strategy Head Catherine Pollard said the world body is running 12 peacekeeping missions. Pollard said they have been advised to start putting contingency plans in place. She added the UN chief can only spend money to safeguard UN assets, staff and the peacekeepers if the budget is not approved. However, the official hoped the member states will conclude their negotiations. The US is the largest contributor to the peacekeeping budget, accounting for 28%, followed by China at 15%. Now in India, at least 10 people have died after a wedding party vehicle fell into a gorge in northern Himachal Pradesh. Officials say 2 other persons sustained critical injuries in the accident in Sirmaur district. The cause of the accident is yet to be ascertained. Prime Minister Modi expressed grief over the accident and announced compensation for the victims. Indian roads are among the world's deadliest, with nearly 148,000 people killed in 2017 alone. In the U.S. state of Florida, the death toll from a building collapse in Miami has risen to 11, while 150 people are still missing. Officials say 130 people have been accounted for so far. Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine said rescue teams pulled 2 more bodies from the rubble. Addressing the media, Levine vowed to keep searching for any possible survivors. However, hopes are fading as no one has been pulled alive from the debris since Thursday. The cause of the collapse remains under investigation. Meanwhile, over 100 people gathered for a vigil in Surfside in tribute to the victims of the building collapse. Now, in the U.S. state of California, a wildfire has burned nearly 2,000 acres next to a stretch of the Interstate 5 called Grapevine. The development comes amid a historic heat wave scorching the U.S. Northwest and California. Officials say the blaze, dubbed Shellfire, started when a vehicle caught fire and its flames spread quickly to vegetation. They said dry conditions and intense heat are taking a toll on the fire crew. However, significant progress has been made during day operations despite high temperatures. In a tweet, the Kern County Fire Department said the fire has now been contained to 50%. Last year, wildfires scorched more than 17,000 square kilometers of land and destroyed hundreds of Californian homes. A U.S. judge has dismissed the antitrust action against Facebook filed last year by federal and state regulators. The U.S. government and more than 40 states sued Facebook in 2020, accusing it of abusing its market power to crush smaller competitors. Judge James Boasberg said the federal lawsuit failed to plead enough facts to plausibly establish a necessary element. The judge noted the complaint says almost nothing concrete on the key question of how much power Facebook actually had. Boasberg said it is almost as if the agency expects the court to simply nod to the conventional wisdom that Facebook is a monopolist. After the decision, Facebook shares surged above $1 trillion for the first time. 9 Ukraine students at a school in Kyiv have been learning how to use a recycling machine in order to save the environment and help needy people. The machines will use plastic bottles as a currency.
In good news for environmentalists, a special vending machine has been set up at a school in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. But unlike other vending machines that cater to humans, this one has been reinvented to provide food for animals and donate money to the needy people. After dropping a bottle into the machine, the school children can select what they would like to spend the money on. By pressing a button, they can choose between buying food for stray animals and making a donation. The donations will also help elderly people or children with special needs like hearing impairments or Down's syndrome.
I have cared for animals since childhood. As for environment protection, it was my mother who taught me what should be done. She was an example for me. But this topic was not so widely discussed in society when I was a child.
After testing a pilot version of the machine in residential areas, project founder Rufat Raimov noticed that children were the most frequent users. The initiative aims to promote environmental awareness among youngsters by installing more machines across the country and then across the world.
It is important that parents take advantage of this additional tool to educate children. When parents come here together with their children, they teach them. Children like the process and absorb the information. Then a child drops a bottle inside and sees an immediate result. It brings joy and happiness, and everyone is excited and wants the project to thrive. We set the most important goal to install such boxes in all Kyiv schools, then all over Ukraine and across the world.
Since the project was launched in October last year, more than 5 tons of plastic has been collected from 6 machines. Raimov said companies including IT, retail and hospitality industries have already placed dozens of orders for the new machines.
Now, the demand of Pakistani mangoes is skyrocketing these days as exporters have become increasingly keen in getting a phenomenal cashback. The mango export target has increased to 170,000 tons. More in this report by our correspondent, Nahil Ahmed.
Pakistan, being an agriculture country, prides itself in the quality of food. Known as the king of fruits, Pakistani mangoes are reaching markets of the Middle East, Europe, Japan, and Australia. Minister for National Food Security and Research Syed Fakhr Imam said exports of Pakistani mangoes have been the highest in the past 8 years.
Exports increased, and one of the major reasons for export, from 110,000 tons, they went up to 142,000 tons. I think this year, if all things go well, we should exceed the 142,000.
Azam Khan, who exports mangoes to the Middle East, is also optimistic about achieving the export target.
We are supplying from Sindh, Tandola Yar, 100,000 kilos every month, and we're empowering the farmer by giving him access to Middle East markets. Pakistan produces 1.7 million tons of mangoes. Among many, Sindhri and Chaunsa are of top quality mangoes exported from Pakistan. Manahil Ahmed, Indus News, Islamabad.
Well, that is all for now. For the latest update, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.